So this one is about the King's move, or the non-shoulder committing top roll. I started to get very interested in this move at the beginning of my career, but didn't put a lot of energy into it until I had elbow surgery. And that's how most arm wrestlers come to understand the King's move, is because of an injury which makes them lose something, like their side pressure or their ability to cup or their ability to rise. The anchor that is the King's move is your ability to pronate and your ability to drag. The keys to the success of this move are your pronation in a strap is going to beat your opponent's ability to cup, and your ability to drag without your cup is greater than your opponent's ability to close their elbow angle. So the drag is stronger than the curl. At some point, what it does is it makes the opponent have to go to the side, and that's when the slow defensive process of advancement begins. The legend, Crazy George. So Crazy George Zakowicz, is, in my opinion, the greatest King's mover that we have ever seen. He's approximately 70 years old now, and by most who know him, he would probably be hailed the number one 176-pound arm wrestler on the planet. And that's an incredible feat in a fight for a guy who is 70 years old. George's stature makes it even more unique, as he's got a very small hand and not a lot of distinct musculature. I learned about George Zakowicz when my second coach, Troy Eaton, did everything he could to get past him, and it just couldn't work. George is really, really good at this move. So we're gonna break down a little bit what's going on in this King's move. So you King's move because you can't arm wrestle with fundamentals. So something's missing, whether it's an ability to cup or rise, normally the main issues, or a lack of side pressure. It is a strap-based move primarily. A lot of King's movers will get in trouble because their hand is so low on the slip. Sometimes they'll get fouls. This is one of the reasons why George stays away from certain competitions, in my opinion, because of the harder ability to get a strap. So it's not a conventional top roll. It's a top roll that only really has true ability in the strap. The King's move, the outside top roll, is best executed in a strap. The two routes are a drag, and that drag is just attacking your opponent's angle so that they cannot curl. They cannot bring their fist closer to their shoulder, because the drag should always beat the ability to curl. And it is not based off wrist flexion. It doesn't have to change the angle of your opponent's pronator initially. It just has to stop that momentum, where they then have to cup to the side so that they can make advancements towards the pin pan. But normally, this is where the strength of the King's move comes out. The pronator is the hard lock on the King's move. People have a hard time accepting this move because so many of the greats at this move have arms that do not straighten. And I want to point out that nobody gets this move overnight. Guys like Crazy George have been arm wrestling for probably 50 years and have been training insane for the entire time. That being said, the King's move does not have to be done by a person with a disability. You can do the King's Move, an open style top roll, with any condition arm. The only key to the whole move is that you focus on dragging and rolling and giving away everything else. So what the King's Mover is doing outside of just dragging and hard pronation is at every opportunity they can, they're regripping and rising higher and higher into their opponent's hand, and thereby becoming more and more efficient as the match goes on. So the entire war of attrition is very easily won and made better and better as the match goes on. Eventually, the efficiency balance gets so extreme that they're able to reattain some level of cupping or supination and regain their shoulder angle so that they can quickly finish the match. When you arm wrestle George, you'll get the sensation that you're being top rolled underneath your own fingers. And this feeling will teach you that the ability to clear your thumb in a regrip is of vital importance both to the offensive capability of the King's Move and the ability to defend against the King's Move. It's normally believed that people with a really fantastic King's Move are probably the best arm wrestlers in the world at stopping matches. As you see here, we have a super heavyweight elite arm wrestler who, with his own tactic, can't really clearly get the pin against an elite King's Move. And this is very, very typical. You will not see many people be able to flash a King's Move in this draft. Sam Harris here, one of the best young talents in the sport. And by the way, I would absolutely love to see this rematch right now. I think it's probably it's probably the best lightweight matchup that you could get. Anyways, at this point, Sam, relying on his strength in his cup to get through, but realizes that against the retreat in the pronator that George has done, he can't quite get through. Artem Tainov, one of the strongest arm wrestlers to come out of Russia, I believe he was a gold medalist this year, got totally shut down. What people have to remember to beat a King's Move is there's a few paths to beating it properly. If the person has an elite King's Move, it will be very difficult to cup their pronation as they trade all their position typically to isolate your ability to cup. So if you are cup dependent in your strategy, you for sure are going to run into problems when facing a King's Move. As you can see here, George has given away almost all his position, just isolating the pronation and hitting Artem's cup, leaving him with fewer options. And also because George's short arm, it makes it more difficult to pin him because that angle it's very difficult for it to open up much more than that. A lot of people don't like what they see when they see the King's Move, but what they're not seeing is the hours and years, decades of arm wrestling that most of the individuals have done in order to get to this point, where you might think this is a simple thing as their arm doesn't straighten, you can't pin them. This is actually not true, and the elite King's Movers are playing a very advanced game where they're forcing you into their strength. It's a choice whether or not you go there. There's been 3 technically sound ways, in my opinion, to beat the King's Move. Here is one of the first ways. So one of the vulnerabilities of the king's move is that it lowers its riser and it attempts to slip. And here you see Anthony Dell'Antonio holding on in a exploding hand style technique and forcing George not to slip. Either George at this point, if it's properly called, may get the foul, and he's isolating this position, knowing that he's in no real danger of being finished. He just has to make sure that his hand doesn't burn out, and that George doesn't have the ability to come up and flop wrist press, which some King's movers do have, but George himself and a King's move exclusive style of arm wrestler does not have. So here you see Anthony has advanced, so he's just holding on just the fingers, just the fingertip. And yeah, this match is dragging on, and that's a foul. That's a foul. That's an intentional slip, quite clearly, which Anthony was able to get from him. And on the restart, and you see he wasn't able to get the strap because it was a foul. Once again, Anthony is able to get into that exploding hand style technique where he's not allowing George to obtain the strap, which he needs to properly do the King's move. And he's just waiting and waiting. Now this is much more difficult than it looks. This was a very big win by Anthony. Next way you can beat a King's move, as seen here. Wish I had done this the last time we pulled, but a lot of guys have been able to climb through King's moves. Major Truman has done it, it was Gasparini, myself here, and a few others. So, and this is attacking the riser in the strap. Now, the one thing to think when going against the King's move, once you're in a strap, is most likely at some point you will bend your wrist backwards on offense, because you're either going to have to rise up through it, but to cup it straight from the point where the strap initially binds you will be very difficult. You'll have to climb up to a point where you can isolate the riser in a press. And lastly, as shown by John Brzenk, who probably there's nobody with a stronger straight cup out there than John Brzenk. He shows that, again, he shows the strength of the King's move, where it was giving his wrist a little bit of a hard time to straight cup it. However, with the strength of his arm and hand, he's able to drag him out of position enough so that he can follow up with a flop wrist press. And this as well has been done successfully by lots of athletes. Andrei Pushkar, rest in peace. I think Dimitri's done it a few times. I did it. You see John doing it here. So I guess the main ways to beat this move are through flop wrist tactics of your own, whether they be rising or pressing, and not allowing your opponent to get strapped.